Welcome to the Autism Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Janine Hershkovitz, and it's my goal to help you create a more peaceful home while living with autistic and neurodivergent loved ones. Each episode, we focus on a different room in the house and help you create a peace plan for your home. So let's get started. Hey friends, welcome back to the Autism Blueprint Podcast. In today's episode, we have the privilege of diving deeper into the journey of Jan Stewart, a remarkable mother and advocate for neurodivergent individuals. This is part 2 of my conversation with Jan, so if you missed our previous episode, you might want to go back and take a listen. In this episode, though, we're going to be exploring the challenges and triumphs of transitioning her children, Andrew and Ainsley, into adulthood and shedding some light on the critical aspects of housing, legal guardianship, financial planning, and inclusive employment opportunities. So get ready to be inspired and informed as we navigate those complexities of parenting neurodivergent individuals with resilience and determination. Let's dive in. Well, Jan, welcome back to the Autism Blueprint Podcast. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. It's great to be here, Janine. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I didn't feel like we had enough time last time to really kind of go into the rest of your story and kind of how to launch our kids, if we launch our kids, all of that. So tell us, and for those who haven't listened to part 1 of my interview with Jan, I'll link to that in the show notes so that you can listen to that first. Otherwise, you might not be up to speed on what we're talking about. But tell us a little bit about where your kids, Andrew and Ainsley, are now, and just a little bit about how they got there.
So good. Well, I'm very excited to tell you where they are now and how they got there. So today, both kids are amazing. They each have full-time jobs, and they're great jobs. We've had some bumps, obviously, along the way, as we all do. But Andrew works in customer service and IT for one of Canada's leading telecommunications companies. And Ainsley is a child and youth counselor working in the classroom with young autistic kids, grades 1 to 3. And it's her lived experience as well as her deep intrinsic knowledge of Andrew that has, I think, made her so gifted. They both advocate, both for themselves and for the broader community. And they embrace life. It's breathtaking to see. But in spite of all that, there's still significant challenges. Like you, Janine, and I would guess like almost every single one of your listeners, I am a forever mom, a forever parent.
Yes.
And we face new challenges at every stage. And transitioning into adulthood means a whole new set of challenges.
What are some of the challenges? Like I'm thinking, like, what are the things that you faced, but also that you didn't realize were going to be a challenge?
Well, first of all, I think in terms of services and supports, many of our kids age out of the autism services and associated condition services and supports. And there's often a gap in young adulthood. Now it's getting better in every community. In Toronto, where I live, there are excellent services and supports, I'm happy to say. But the wait list can be long. Yeah. Sometimes it's not easy to access. It's overly complex to figure out. There are all kinds of sometimes obstacles and barriers you have to work your way around. And it always helps to have someone facilitate it for you and help you with that. So that's one area. Both kids, for example, needed to change didn't need to change their psychiatrists, but needed to change their psychologists, who were child psychologists at different points. And it's hard to find the right psychologist, and I think this is true for social workers and other professionals, healthcare professionals, who deal particularly, in my kids' cases, not only with autism, but with co-occurring conditions like OCD, ADHD, and Andrew's case, developmental disabilities, executive function that all our kids have, those deficits. And you have to really work hard to find them. And it took quite a while, but you just have to be like a dog with a bone, but be assertive, not aggressive. Put yourself in the other person's shoes and then just keep at it. That was on the therapy side for the kids. On the psychiatry side, so the medication side, the diagnoses, all that side, their psychiatrist, Dr. Joseph Biederman, who had been head of the Department of Neuropsychopharmacology at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, and he had seen them since Andrew was 9, Ainsley was 7 or 8, and then he died tragically at the beginning of last year. Now, we knew
Oh,
he was ill, and he gave us a heads up to look. So again, it took time to find someone, and I really wanted someone, if we could, local here in Canada, in Toronto, and we were fortunate to find a fantastic young psychiatrist who the kids trust and who's great with them, and that trust is so important. So that's the healthcare side.
okay.
Another major challenge, and not all of our kids need this by any means, is some type of supportive housing. And there is a wide range of options. There are treatment centers, there are group homes, there are pocket communities and supported independent living. Now, Ainsley hasn't need any of those, but she does need support from a housing point
Mhm,
of view in different ways. But Andrew lacks the capability of taking care of himself,
mhm.
both in terms of his personal care and financially in all ways that way. So another area that I'll talk about in a few minutes is legal guardianship or powers of attorney, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But we knew that he wouldn't be able to live by himself.
Mhm.
We also knew, and this is true across North America, it's terrible, that the wait lists for supportive housing are years and years and years long. It's awful. And so I got on those wait lists for him. And while we were waiting, I dove back into research. And as you know from the first segment, Janine, I shout out about the need for systematic research because that's what gives us power. Information is power,
For sure.
and that knowledge. And about 9 months later, I found a lovely private group home, just about 10 or 15 minutes away from our place. And Andrew moved in there very enthusiastically and stayed there for about 10 years. Now, very, very expensive. I'm the first to tell you that, and I know how fortunate we are, in spite of the fact, we don't have 2 cars, we don't go on vacations, we sacrifice, but it's still outrageously expensive. But there are alternatives and options. There are organizations that you can, again, the wait list can be long, but there are families that take in autistic and neurodivergent adults. And as part of their families, you just have to persevere and keep looking. Um, you might consider renting an apartment or a unit for your child and bringing in as much support as you need. So
Mm.
sometimes you have to be creative.
Yeah.
But there are options. Don't give up and just get on the phone and go see all the autism service providers you can and find out what they are and just keep at it. Again, be assertive versus aggressive. Now, after about 10 years there, and Andrew loved it, but both he and we decided that we might try supported independent living for him. We knew it would be an experiment, but I looked around and found a sunny 1 bedroom, literally a 5-minute walk from our house. And we rented it for him. And he's been there about 6 years. It's fantastic. Every
Wow.
morning, David and I, up until recently, and I'll tell you about that,
Mhm.
have taken turns going to his place, waking him up because his medications put him in too deep a sleep to get up by himself. We make his meals. We oversee him tidying up and getting ready for work because he does work full time, and we're going to talk about employment.
Mhm.
And then off he goes for the day. Make sure he takes his medications, and off he goes. And
Mhm.
that's worked really well. Then about a month or so ago, I broke my foot, and David and Ainsley were out of town for a few weeks. And I thought, what are we going to do? But Andrew said, I'm going to step up, basically. And so now what we do is I go down 3 mornings a week, and the rest of the mornings, he sets his alarm. Sometimes he doesn't hear it because of that deep sleep, so I just keep calling till he wakes up. And if I have to, I'll go down. I think it's only happened once or twice. We FaceTime each other, And I watch him make his breakfast, tidy up. I remind him, do you have a fresh handkerchief? Have you brushed your teeth? What about deodorant? Have you made your bed? Is the refrigerator door closed? Now, the night before, I send him his lunch and his dinner in Tupperware, right? So he's taken care of and he feels more independent. And it reminded me of a lesson that we talked about last time, to presume competence. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's Andrew on the housing side.
Okay.
Ainsley has her own unit, her own apartment, just another 5 minutes away, but she lacks the capabilities to budget. Her executive function deficits are severe. So, cleaning up, doing laundry, remembering not to forget this or that, these are major challenges for her.
Mhm.
So, we've set up a system which we call it the ADHD buddy system, call it Autism and ADHD buddy system. And once every 2 weeks, we sit down together and say, what haven't you done? What needs to be done? That way, if we found when I was doing it once a week, it felt like nagging to her. But
Yeah.
once every 2 weeks works for her with housing that way. So that's the housing.
I love the way that you've supported them. And this is something that my husband and I have been talking about at length lately, because we have both kids living back with us. And Rebecca has shared, with our audience that
Right.
she is neurodivergent and is seeking diagnosis. And we'll definitely have an update on that soon. But um, the point being that when you were saying about, you call it the ADHD buddy system, we've always called it shadowing. And my daughter came up with that term. I don't know if it's a clinical term, but she's always said, would you shadow me
Oh,
while I get this task done?
yeah,
And sometimes that would mean I would sit on her bed and play on my phone while she was doing whatever she was doing. She just needed another body there,
yep,
just to be able to, I guess, have the energy to keep going and the impetus to keep going. I kind of equate that to like when I was in college, and if I studied in my dorm room, it was different than studying in the library, right? Where other people are studying.
right.
So you almost are setting the tone for what you're going to do.
Yeah,
And I think
fantastic.
that's something that we just take for granted as neurotypical
Mhm.
individuals, whereas neurodivergent individuals sometimes just need to know, oh, surround yourself with people doing the same activity and that might help,
That
or get yourself someone that can hold you accountable and that might help. Um,
Yes,
so
because I
that's
think the
how.
key is I'm sure for Rebecca as it is for Ainsley. Ainsley will tell me there's no one more frustrated by my lack of organization, by my inability to execute something than
Yes.
herself.
Yes. Yes, because the times when, 'cause I wasn't always an understanding
Of
mom,
course not.
there were times when she was a teenager, I was like, "This room is a pigsty." Like,
Right,
"Oh my gosh."
right.
And she would tell me the same thing. "Yeah, I'm as frustrated as you, mom. I get it. I know."
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But the key around housing
Mhm.
is to start early. Look, I know we all worry about the future, particularly when we're not around, and I'm gonna talk about that soon.
Okay.
But there's lots you can do to start preparing. And looking at the housing options, your child's capabilities and needs may change dramatically over the next 5, 10 years. But start knowing what those options are. You're never gonna know them all, and you can't, but you will know many of them. So when the time comes, you're much it's much faster and easier to pull the trigger.
Yeah, yeah. Now, do you mind me asking, are they able to generate enough income to pay their own bills, or do you still help with
Oh,
that?
no, 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 we have to help. They generate good incomes, both of them,
Mhm.
but no, not enough. Especially Toronto is one of the most expensive housing markets in North America. And,
Oh, I didn't realize that.
oh, yeah, it's
Okay, like on par with New York City?
probably just under New York, but yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
No, no. So, financially, neither of them can take care of themselves without a doubt, but they both contribute, and they know they both contribute. That's important. We set
Good.
aside a certain amount of their paychecks every month that goes in for their housing and living expenses.
Wonderful. So tell me, I think I know the answer to this, but I want you to talk about it. Tell me how that helps them, that being able to contribute and living on their own. What have you seen in them just as people? How does it help?
I think for all of us, it brings that self-esteem and that feeling of worth and that positive attitude of, "I can do it." And I see
Mm,
it in both of them that way. They're so proud of themselves in different ways when they can do it.
yeah.
In Andrew's case, for years, we just until recently, we disabled his stove and oven, and I still won't let him near the stove and oven without me there or David there because,
Okay.
he'll probably hurt himself. But I went out to about 6 or 7 different autism organizations a few months ago and found these wonderful knives for autistic kids that called, I don't know how to pronounce it, Kibidea, Kibbidea. You can look them up. It says it's for
Okay.
kids. I've ordered a set for us, and Ainsley has a set too. They have rounded edges and serrated, so it cuts the food and it cuts it well, but it doesn't cut skin.
Oh my
I
goodness.
assume it could cut skin, but not easily. The other thing I've done is gone out to the autism organizations, and a number of them were kind enough to send step-by-step recipes for restrictive eaters like Andrew and Ainsley. Andrew won't eat anything that has texture. It's got to be smooth. So I have about 20 different recipes, and he does them with me now. So,
Wow.
you see that wanting to be able to do it as much as he can, but both of them will also say, and they don't feel badly anymore, "I can't do it." And sometimes we'll say, "Yes, you can." And other times we'll say, "We understand."
100%. Oh gosh, we're definitely I'm gonna look those up and link
Oh
to
yeah,
those in
they're
the show
great.
notes.
They're great.
Fabulous. Yeah, I've actually recently been looking for a stove and oven that would shut off automatically
Mm,
just for my own house, just because all
yep,
everybody in my household currently
right.
is some form of ADHD except
Yeah.
me.
But I'm
And
wondering if the Alzheimer's societies might, also have
you
something there. I
you
don't
know
know.
what? That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I've actually been to they have a website.
Mm,
There's an Alzheimer's store
mm,
even that has a website that I found a lot of
interesting.
really helpful things on. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's a great idea.
yeah.
Jan, what I love so much about what you're saying is that you're meeting your children where they are,
Well,
even though they're
I try
grown up.
to. I can't I'm not perfect by any means, and there are
Yeah.
times when I know I go overboard and it doesn't work, but you try and you remind yourself when you make a mistake, A, to be kind to yourself, that it's gonna pass, that the
Yes.
children will forgive you, but
Yes.
also that you're doing your best.
Yes, I've done a lot of apologizing to both my children for not knowing, when I made decisions that I made, and not giving them the benefit of the doubt or presuming their competence when I really should have.
It's a tricky balance because if you, let's be honest, if you presume too much and they can't, frustration can grow. So it is a tricky balance. It's baby steps, and then you
Yeah,
can generally see it. And I talked last time about the critical importance of partnerships with everyone involved in your child's care. Those partnerships come in handy here. So when I talk to their therapists, their psychiatrists, I can, we talk about these things and what do you think? We bounce ideas off each other.
I love that, and you mentioned that in your book, Hold On Tight, about building that community of people, that village around your children, and how important that is. And that is something that I've talked about, for decades. That we really can't do it on our own. And anytime that I've tried, and I have tried, I've failed miserably.
Well, of
So
course. I
yeah,
mean, none of us is superhuman. Just as we
right.
discussed, I think, last time, our children
Yes.
aren't superhuman. They don't have superpowers. They just are special because of their character traits, abilities, all that. But this ties right in to those circles of support that you need to look forward to. So depending as your child becomes of legal adult age,
Mhm.
you can look at a number of options depending on their profiles. Again, not everyone needs this, but legal guardianship, power of attorney, circles of support, and formalized circles of support into nonprofit corporations, which are called microboards, that are becoming increasingly popular. In Andrew's case, as I said, he lacks the capability to responsibly take care of himself, both in terms of his personal care and what's called here in Canada, his property, finances, and real estate. So when he was 21 or 22, David and I applied to the courts to become his legal guardians, and it's quite an extensive process. You need all kinds of documentation from doctors, from others. So make sure you have everyone, lined up to do that. I highly recommend, it's not outrageously expensive. If you can, hire a lawyer to help you through it. They expedite
Absolutely.
and they can interact with the courts and tell you what's needed. If you can't, there are many parents like me who have done this, but you need to find someone in your jurisdiction. I
Yes.
wouldn't be able to help someone in the States or depending on the state because it's all different. Um, and once it's granted, it becomes a major, major responsibility. By the way, before I even tell you about that, you have to make sure that your child supports and is comfortable with it too. They
I was going to
actually
ask you about that. How
Yes,
did you
they
talk
actually
to him
served
about it?
Andrew with papers. Now, Andrew knew this was gonna happen, we had prepared him, but he supported it fully, at least for a while. Now he's back to supporting it, but, once it's granted, you have to report to the courts every single penny you spend, you disperse, and the receipts
Mm,
annually. Now, I think we report to the courts every 5 years or so, but they want every year's detailed receipt. And I support this fully. It's
yeah,
onerous, but it
yeah,
protects vulnerable individuals. I don't want our kids to be taken advantage of by someone who's unsavory, and it happens, as we know.
yeah.
So Andrew supported it and then got it in his head about a year or two after it had been granted that we were taking away his freedom and his rights. And he
Uh-oh.
started melting down again and going into tirades and grandiosity. And again, through medication and therapy, we were able to bring that down. And today he adores it. It gives him comfort and security, and he knows he needs that protection. He loves joking about it. I think I tell the story about how a few months ago I said, Andrew, you need to make your bed. And he said, Mom, you're my guardian, you make it.
Ah.
So we joke. Now, as David and I are getting older,
Mhm.
we don't just stop and relax and say, okay, he's taken care of. Or if we're hit by a bus today, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
So we decided we always want 3 legal guardians for Andrew, both on his personal care and his property side. So Ainsley has joined us on his personal care side because she really understands him. She's firm but fair. She's great. But of course, as I said, she doesn't have the capability on the financial or real estate side.
Right.
Neither David nor I has any family near us that has any interest.
Okay.
And it's important that, because it takes a lot of time, as you know, that someone really be invested in it.
Yeah.
So about 18 months after we started looking, we found a family friend who's an investment professional who kindly has taken this on and become co-guardian with us on the property side. It's fantastic to see.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, that is definitely something that we are having to revise. When the kids were younger and my son, had his diagnosis, we set up a special needs trust
Right.
so that if anything happened, and for those that don't know, at least in the States, the special needs trust will protect any assets from being counted against the
Correct.
person with the disability so that they can still collect their SSI income or whatever they collect as an adult. But it's definitely something that we now have to relook at because my parents, who are now elderly, weren't at the time, were our guardians for our kids, and now I kind of feel like, well, gosh,
Right.
I always thought that Becca would kind of be in charge of his finances, and now she's looking at me going, I can't even take care of my own. Like, I'm not really sure what we're gonna do here. So it is, I do feel like as a parent, you're constantly reevaluating these things and you're never just like, oh, we're good to go now.
Mhm. Yeah, and that tied into Ainsley too. We knew she didn't need legal guardianship, but as I said, with her ADHD and her executive function deficits, there's no way that she could independently have her own place, pay her bills, and all that stuff. So we have set up for her a circle of support with different family members and mostly friends who take an interest and have an expertise in different areas. So one in finance, one in recreation, one in dogs. Ainsley has a dog that she adores. So she is covered if she has any questions about anything. And that will change over the next several years as people come in and out of her life and her situation changes, the same as for all of us. So it's just something to be aware of. The key is to face your fears and deal with it so that it gives you such peace of mind. I can tell you that, to know that, again, if you're hit by a bus today, there are structures in place to help your kids.
Oh, and I'm so glad you said that about facing your fears. That gave me goosebumps because I think you were talking to me. So I
And to
always want
me, and to me.
I oh my gosh, I always need my audience to know, like, the number one question I get is, how do I prepare for getting older and eventually not being here anymore? And for decades I was like, well, we're just not going to think about that yet. And and that's sticking your head in the sand is one way to deal with it, but not the best way.
Right. And if you don't have a group of like-minded parents and caregivers of adult kids in your community,
Yeah.
form one. If you have the energy, create one, reach out. You can do it through social media. You can do it. You can call autism service providers. They often have the groups, but you can form your own. We recently did that with a group of about 10 of us. We call ourselves Forever Moms. And so
Aw.
we bring up these issues. Have you thought about this? What about this? And we can help one another and give each other tips.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea, and that is definitely something that we are working on, with the podcast and just with our podcast community, and being able to connect them more online so
Good,
that they can meet people in their area.
good.
So that's definitely in the works. How do you how did you get past that initial fear? Because I have to say, I'm, as a mother of a son, he's 26 now, and he's limited verbally
Mm-hmm.
and can't keep himself safe.
Right.
The thought of him being like living on his own
Mhm.
without me there all the time scares the life out of me. How do you get past that?
Um, for me,
Mhm.
again, I think I'm lucky to be wired this way, but when the kids were young and in such crisis, with Andrew's violent, frightening 2-hour meltdowns every day and bizarre nonstop rituals, with Ainsley's totally unruly, disruptive, rude behavior, those were the worst times. So fast forward 14 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and was out of work for a year with 4 operations, radiation, and chemotherapy. And yet I always knew I had stage 3, not 4. I always knew it would be a year and a half of treatment and I'd climb out of it, but my kids weren't. And that put things in perspective and kept me going. And so as we approach these years, I always want to get in front of it. And
Yeah.
we need to do it. Now, I think my advocacy work helps. I chair, as you know, Carrie's Place, the largest autism services provider. And so I deal with these issues all the time from a governance point of view as well. And that helps raise awareness. And that's another reason I shout out about it.
Yeah.
But there are 2 other major areas, Janine, that I think are so critical. One is financial planning, and the other is employment.
Okay.
So in financial planning, I don't care if your kid is 3 years old. If your kid is 10 years old, if you haven't done a full financial plan, start it now. It's going to change as you gain more clarity about your child and what they can and can't do and what they can handle, but you can revise and update it. But you
Right.
need to get your arms around the costs, which, as you know, can be extreme and such a burden
Yeah.
between private therapy, medications not covered by insurance, supportive housing, the list goes on, food,
Yeah.
transportation, that you asked earlier if the kids could take care of it all themselves financially. No, we have to pay for their food and transportation and many things. They just contribute what they can. So
Right.
that's important. And financial planners, by the way, particularly fee-based financial planners who don't sell product and are objective, don't
Mhm.
cost a lot and can really help give you a more secure outlook and future. Now,
Oh,
on the
that's good.
employment side, Study after study are pretty terrible in showing that 70%, and I've seen stats up to 85%, of neurodivergent and autistic individuals are unemployed, and I know that more are underemployed.
Yeah.
And this is a huge barrier. We know that our kids have skills and capabilities and want to work. And by the way, they're healthier when they do. So, what do we need to do? We need to find an inclusive workplace, not one that says they are, but one that walks the talk.
Yeah.
Andrew's had several employers, all of whom were well meaning. But one of them, frankly, just wanted him to be a poster boy for autism and neurodiversity. He was their first autistic employee. They gave him 1 hour of boring work, which was not good for the ADHD part of his brain, and then told him he could go watch TV.
Ugh.
He had another employer. He was a cashier at a retailer. I write about this in the book, and he was surprisingly wonderful. I remember thinking, how is he going to make change? Isn't he going to get ripped off? And he never was. People helped him when he needed help. But I snuck in after 4 or 5 months to see how he was doing. And I had happy tears in my eyes. There were 4 cashiers. He had 4 or 5 customers on his line. The other 3 had no one. And I overheard management trying to move them. Don't you want to move more quickly? And da da da. And not one of them would budge. And it's because Andrew knew their names, knew their kids, what was going on in their lives, and he made their days happier. That was great for the first number of years. And then new management came in. And without any explanation, it was right before Christmas, they said, we need you in the back stocking shelves. It's the busy holiday season. So he was a team player and he went and did it. But then January came, no word. And February came, no word. And then one day he was signing in, and on the sign-in sheet, he saw a note saying, do not put Andrew back on cash.
Ugh.
Now, I knew what had happened. They didn't want an obviously disabled-looking employee on the front line talking to customers, so they wanted to hide him in the back. I was absolutely irate. I took care of it within 24 hours. But of course, trust had been broken, so it was time for him to move on.
Yeah.
Now, for the past 5.5 years, he's found his dream job and his dream employer.
Wow.
Rogers Communications, as I said, is one of Canada's leading telecom companies, and they've turned that well-meaning into true inclusivity, and they've created an environment of belonging. So even before he started, they held an in-service education session with us so they could get to know Andrew holistically. They've treated us as partners. There's that word again. They listen to our recommendations. So first recommendation, please bring in a job coach for him. We have a great organization in Canada, Ready, Willing, and Able, that is across this country, funded by the government, and I'm sure the US has many of these, several of these, to help employers find and retain autistic employees, and those with intellectual disabilities in this case. And it's been so fruitful. From that, they've customized accommodations, and Andrew never wants to leave. And he always says, I'm not defined by my autism. I want to be the best employee, not the best autistic employee.
Gosh, I love that. I love that. I just, that makes my heart so happy. And what I'm hearing is that as parents, we have to be patient and we have to be ready for these things to change sometimes midstream. And this is something too that I've experienced in the education community where, every time I thought we found the right school, the right classroom, the right placement, we'd have another shift or we'd lose a teacher or he would outgrow it or and so you really have to be good at what I call it surfing because
Mhm.
here I'm from the Northeast originally, but in Florida here everybody surfs.
Yeah.
So it's a good analogy. But I had to learn how to emotionally surf this terrain because it could change at a moment's notice.
You're absolutely right. And again, this goes back to presuming competence when they're adults. However, to me, an inclusive employer, for example, is one that's understanding and lets the employee take the lead if they can. If not, it's their advocate. So in Andrew's case, it's both of us together because I never do anything behind his back.
Yes.
All right. And
Yes.
let the company or organization know what they need in order to succeed. So it does take self-awareness or parental awareness.
Yes, 100%. It really does. Um, we've talked a lot about what you've done as a mom. You mentioned in your book your husband David. Let me ask about how
Mm.
you guys have managed. How many years have you been married first?
We've been married 38 years.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. Um, how did you make that last so long?
Look, every marriage and partnership has challenges, especially
Mhm.
when we're in crisis. And with our kids, we're more in crisis than others often.
Correct. Yes.
And the stress and strain can be debilitating. For David and me, I think we've been very fortunate. There is a matter of luck involved, but we have always understood the critical importance of trusting one another, leaning on one another, and knowing that even though it's not what I might do, he's trying his best and he does the same with me. It's giving each other the benefit of the doubt above all. It's maintaining open communication. And it's really keeping a close eye on any tendency to blame one another, accuse one another. I'm sure, Janine, that you've heard many parents, as I do, who are critical of one another, who accuse that you're not carrying your weight, you're not
Yeah.
doing this. There are huge disagreements over medications, I think, in particular.
Yes.
I don't believe in medications. My kid doesn't need them. I don't want my kid to turn into a zombie or blah, blah, blah. And there are side effects you obviously have to watch, and I understand it.
Yeah.
But I always say our kids have inbuilt antenna. They do. They know when we're not on the same page.
Yes.
So you want to try to act as harmoniously as you can. Of course, we want to throttle each other from time to time. And I do think one of the keys to our success has also been the fact that we're not afraid to lead parallel lives in many ways. We can't go on long vacations together, or we're never going to retire to Florida and be with you and anything like that in the future. So
Right.
David goes off with the guys on golf vacations or ski vacations. I'll go to
Yes.
do all my speaking on neurodiversity and mental health. I play duplicate bridge at a very competitive level. I'll go to those tournaments. So we do that, and that's fine.
Yes.
When the kids were little, it was very difficult in April for me because David's a financial planner, a tax accountant, and he would be working 24/7, and I was alone with the kids every weekend. Now it's different that they're adults.
Yeah.
It's less stressful that way, but it's still there, and sometimes you need help. So
Yeah.
it's reaching out to that support you need as well while you're respecting one another. And for me, as I said last time, it's other parents and caregivers of neurodivergent children that really lift me the most.
Yes, 100%. I can relate to so much of what you're saying, Jan, because I remember very vividly the moment that I realized early on in my marriage, 2 kids deep, issues all over the place with them, and thinking to myself, oh, my husband doesn't have to meet my every need. I had bought into this, that fairy tale of like, "Oh, he completes me and, we're gonna be so happy," and we're 'cause, I was crazy about him and we get together and then I'm like, "But wait, you're not fulfilling all my needs." Like, what so I had to look at, my expectations for him, and he had to do the same with me, because you find out along the way, especially when you get married young, and we were only in our early 20s,
Yeah.
um that you have to get your needs met within reason, um in other ways. My friendships, there are people that I will call with certain things that I'll call before I'll go to my
Mhm.
husband,
Mhm.
just because I need to process them through in a way, with another woman, you know what I mean,
Yes.
or something like that, with a girlfriend who gets it.
Absolutely. And I think in most marriages and partnerships that I know, including mine, we've each naturally fallen into different roles.
Yes.
So, and I'm wired to take charge with the doctors, the healthcare community, the housing, the employers, all that stuff. And a lot of people see that as the hard work. But David's willing to do that. It's just I'm faster, so I say I'll
Uh-huh.
do it. And
Yep.
I'm more decisive, probably too decisive. On David's side, though, he's always taken an equal role. He is an equal partner, but it's much more the fun parent. So when they were little, coaching their teams, soccer, baseball, whatever, now taking them, whether it's camping or to concerts or whatever it is, sometimes
Yeah.
going on vacation because, it's hard for us to go as a family. So sometimes one of
Yeah.
us takes one of the kids.
Yep.
And it works for us. But you have to find, just like every autistic individual is unique and different, I think every marriage and partnership is, and you have to find what works for you.
100%. I mean, it's so interesting that I feel like what my kids have taught me most importantly about relationships is that you have to work with what is in front of you, not take what you have and try to fit it into this
Correct. Yeah.
box or some kind of, I guess I had so many ideas in mind about what my family was supposed to look
Yes.
like. And I know my husband did too. And then when we didn't have that, we were like, well, something's wrong. It's like our child's not speaking. So you do hours and hours and hours of speech
Right.
therapy. But instead of that, I kind of wish I had gone another route with like, let's teach him other ways to communicate,
Oh,
and
you can always look back and say, "I wish," but
yes,
that's
yes,
not I don't think that's not helpful. I mean,
I
I
do.
look back to the disagreements I had with David when when Andrew was first born, because he was our firstborn. Should we give
Mhm.
him a sucker or have him suck his thumb? And this caused, like, huge blowups. Or because we're in Canada, should we educate them in French and English, or just
Yeah,
English? Who cares if they
right.
can communicate, if they can take care of themselves, and be
100%. Yes. So
mostly.
I think that that's the difference between really kind of accepting and embracing
Yes.
the life that you've been given as you said, as a forever parent,
Mhm.
because that's the road that we're on. And until we can get to that place, and I think in order to get to that place, you have to process all the feelings that go along with it. And there's a lot.
And it still continues today. There are
Yeah.
days I just wanna run away and hide.
Yes.
I talk about in the book that there was a time where I didn't even care if I lived because I didn't see any future for myself, any happiness. But you pick yourself up, you propel forward, and you just have to remember it's an endless roller coaster. But you learn to try to enjoy the good times. They're not going to always last, but when you're down in the depth, you remind yourself that they too are not going to last.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think that's probably a good place to end today so that I don't take up too much of your time. I am wondering, I want to ask you the same question as last time, but in regard to our children getting older and the parents getting older, what do you want parents to know when it comes to that topic?
I just want to reinforce what I've said before. You have a
Mhm.
choice when your children are young, just as when they grow up, to embrace life or be defeated by it. If you face your fears, you embrace it. You're not letting life control you. You're controlling as much as you can in life. Of course, there are things that happen that are unexpected or you can't control, but take that charge, take the reins. And Winston Churchill said it best: when you're going through hell, keep going.
Keep going. I love that. I love that. I'm so glad you ended with that. I love Winston Churchill. Well, Jan, I am so happy that we got to meet because I am definitely going to keep in touch with you.
I would love
And
that.
if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, to be very frank, I'm just closing my Instagram and Facebook, and the reason is because it's taking a lot of time to do it properly, and I really want to focus 200% on my in-person advocacy, on my governance board work, on my speaking and my writing. So if it's
Great.
okay with you, Janine, and only if it's okay with you,
Mhm.
anyone who wants to reach out and ask a question can write to you, and you can forward it to me.
I love that idea. I
Okay.
think
All
that's
right. But I don't
wonderful.
want to
So, yeah.
impose on you.
Oh, no, no. That's not an imposition at all. If anybody wants to get in touch with Jan, just, you can email me, Janine@autismblueprint.com. And, in the show notes, there's always ways to get in touch with me. So, absolutely. Jan, this has been an absolute delight getting to know you. I wish you all the best in your advocacy work. And thank you for doing the work that you do because I know how busy you are because I am as well.
Yes.
And somehow we just keep going and fighting for other families. And
Well,
I'm
thank
just
you for
so
what you
glad.
do too, Janine. We're sisters in this battle together.
100%, 100%. I might be calling you when I have a bad day.
Feel free.
Take care.
The information in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional.